All right, guys, welcome back to the Short Story Long podcast. I'm your host, Sam Derrickson, joined by my co-host, Andrew Dial.
What's up, guys?
I'm coming back for another podcast tonight, late at night, getting one of these guys recorded for you. What's new with you, Dozer?
What's new with me? I had a air compressor meltdown, I guess, last week trying to get stuff done. Got a new air compressor, which that was some money I did not want to spend at all.
Maybe you should back up a little bit.
All right.
Want to talk about why you were hustling in the garage? No?
I don't know where you're going with that.
What have you been doing? Cutting brackets?
Oh, yeah, I've been cutting brackets and stuff, just metal shop stuff.
Just going hard with Peace Lily work?
Yeah, I got kind of surprised by one of my customers. Kind of decided they would take multiple months of inventory right away. So started hitting that hard. And honestly, my air compressor was used when I bought it in 2019. And I've done nothing but just run the crap out of it. So it's been knocking for a year. It's like one of those, like, it's been knocking, then it like blows up. It's like, what? Who could have seen this coming?
Kind of on borrowed time, so to speak.
Yes, it didn't owe me a dime.
That's fair.
So that, and Easter was last weekend, and been doing some turkey hunting. And I've always had a theory. So we have a half-acre field in the middle of the big woods. And my theory was, and it's worked out, is if you just sit there, don't call or anything, eventually during the day, a turkey's going to walk out there. And I killed 5 turkeys 5 years in a row doing that. And then last year I didn't kill one, but I only hunted one day, and I brought Wyatt, and he wanted to leave. So he left at 8 o'clock, and there was turkeys in the field by 8:10 on the cell phone cameras.
Damn it.
And I that was when we were taking over Jedco, so I only hunted one day that year. And then this year, I've hunted 2 days, and my theory has not been playing out.
So you're going to go back out and call, or what are you thinking?
Well, I'll probably go back out Wednesday and just continue to test that theory.
Gotcha. So, yeah, your air compressor story, you called me to see if I had one.
Right.
And you ended up getting one from someone else, which is fine. I'm happy for you.
There's also another customer and family member, so
I didn't even have one for you.
I would have bought one if you'd have had one.
But just today on the loading dock, I haven't uncrated it yet, but it is probably the biggest vertical air compressor that I'm ever going to see ever.
Yeah.
The picture online, they're all the same size, right? And I read the specs, and all I was concerned about was CFM and price, because that's all the customer was concerned about, was CFM and price. And he has a sandblaster from me that requires an enormous amount of air. And he has a Curtis 80 gallon, which is a 26.9 SCFM at 175. It's a monster air compressor, and it doesn't even have any hope of keeping up with that sandblaster.
I got a Curtis that'll keep up with him.
So I tried to buy yours and put it in his shop, and Jared Sarver told me there's basically no way without getting 3-phase to make that work. The motor to make it work was going to be $10,000, or the phase converter to make it work was going to be $6,000, like just not worth it. So I basically bought him the largest single phase compressor in the world, I'm sure. It's 120 gallon.
Holy cow.
So the air requirements that I need are rated at 100 PSI, and I need 45 CFM at 100 PSI. This is 39 CFM at 175, and it's a 120 gallon vertical air compressor. And I didn't read the gallons. I just read the CFM, like I said.
You're like, this will do.
And so Brent texts the group, who ordered a 120 gallon air compressor? And I'm like,
some idiot, that's who.
Yeah, what kind of idiot orders who needs a 120 gallon air compressor? I was like, wait a minute, is it a Legacy? And he said, yeah. And I get back to the loading dock, and it is, in the crate, like I said, I haven't uncrated, but it's like 7 foot tall.
Nice.
And it's, probably a 60-inch square pallet that it's on. It's a monster. So looking forward to getting that set up. That's going to be pretty cool. And it's a quiet. It's got like a built-in air dryer and a muffler built in, so
Okay.
it's supposedly super quiet.
That's probably like a 10K deal.
No, it was only like 7,800, eight grand, somewhere right in there.
Essentially free.
Yeah, I mean, for what it is, I mean, you'd legit have to have two $4,000 air compressors to come close to doing what this is doing. So I mean, I don't know. I'm excited to see it. Everyone that I've told about it said there's no way that's single phase. There's no way you can have a 10 horsepower single phase motor. Not real. Well, it's a 10 horsepower, 240 volt single phase motor. So
How many amp is it?
a lot.
A lot.
Yeah. So jury's still out on if we're gonna get this sucker to work or not. But
Yeah, so everybody who listens probably thinks my claim to fame is this radio show.
it's not.
It's not. No, it's the fact that I have probably one of the biggest piston-driven air compressors in the tri-state area.
I would definitely agree with that, because when you bought it, it's an FS Curtis, and I called my FS Curtis supplier with the serial number and part number, and I was like, "Hey, just curious, my customer has this older compressor. Is there still parts available?" He's like, "That's not right. That can't be right. The part number that's not right. That's a pretty old compressor, and it's huge. Like it runs a whole town, basically." And I was like, "Well, here's a picture." He's like, "Dear God, yeah, that's the right compressor, and we can still get parts for it, but they're special order."
So Sam is bragging about his vertical air compressor that's 7 foot tall. My horizontal air compressor is 7 foot tall.
It's on a pallet, but still.
But so when we were running the metal shop full time, we had a job that required a ton of sandblasting, and just like your customer experienced, we were outrunning our 5-horse 80-gallon pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I got on Marketplace. I was like, I'm broke business person, need to find me an air compressor. And we had 3-phase at our shop, which really opens up the market as far as cheap, big air compressors.
Because they don't have a big market, because no one really has 3-phase. So 3-phase equipment, you can get picked up a lot cheaper.
So I find this air compressor that says 240 gallon air compressor, 3-phase, 25 horse. And it's a picture of it up against like a bare wall.
Okay.
And looking at the picture, I would have assumed it was about the size of your average air compressor, right?
Right. Like 6 foot long, maybe.
Maybe, you know what I mean? So I get there, it's 7 foot tall, 7 foot long, and 3 foot wide. It will air the 240 gallon tank up from 0 to 175 PSI in 45 seconds. And that's not even a joke. I'm 100% serious.
That's moving air. You got to keep your small children away from
It's like a 7.5 inch bore on the one side of the compressor.
the first stage.
So when we kind of backed the metal shop down and moved it back home and took over Jedco, I still kept that air compressor because, that's what I, show to people. So that's my claim to fame.
Andrew Dial.
So rounding that out, when we were talking about it's impossible to run something like that on single phase, I had the dream of bringing it out to my house and putting a gas motor on it.
Okay.
So
So I'd be curious to know, because they rate electric motors in horsepower. So you said that was a 75 horsepower motor, I think, is what Jared said.
25.
25?
25.
Is that all?
Yep. 25 3-phase.
So like how does electric horsepower compare with gasoline horsepower? And it's got to be in torque, because
I don't know. You've got the special website. We could look that up in duck power or something.
It was only distance.
Oh.
Anyway, so like I would assume it's got to be a torque thing, because like a 25 horsepower V-twin lawnmower engine, there's no way it'd spin that compressor.
So like a 25 horse gas motor is 25 horse at 3,600 RPM.
Right.
This is 25 horse at 1,750.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume
and zero. From 0 to
Right.
1750.
So I would assume you would need something in the tune of 50 horse gas motor running at 1,750, or well, you could probably use like pulley it.
Sure.
You could probably take a 25 horse gas motor and run it at 3,600 and just change the pulleys now that I think about it.
Yeah.
So I would assume the Harbor Freight 22 horse would probably get it done.
I bet she'd burn some gas though.
But then you get into your clutching and all that. I'm guessing you could buy. I mean, they make gas operated air compressors, so there's got to be some clutches out there or something to do that.
Sure. I don't know if they'd go big enough though. Be interesting little project, but they'd be way easier just to hook it to 3-phase.
Well, not at my house. It'd be way easier just not to use it.
Well, that too.
So then I was going to sell it and use that money to buy a razor. I had this like 55, 60-year-old guy show up, and he's like, this is a lot bigger than I thought it was. Apparently the same,
same thing happened to him.
Same thing happened to him as far as taking photos. And he goes, I've only seen one bigger than this before. It was off a battleship.
Yep.
I was like, okay. And, he holds his arms out in a circle. The cylinders are this big. Okay. And he looks me dead in the eye and he goes, it was so big, it was 4-phase.
Yeah, none of that pussy 3-phase.
Yeah.
stuff.
And so I called my buddy Jared, who's an electrician. I was like, please tell me 4-phase isn't real. He's like, absolutely not.
Not even such a thing.
So he pulls out his phone and takes a selfie next to it. He goes, I got to be in the picture to show people how big this is. So he only had single phase, and he thought for sure he could make it work.
Have you heard back from him?
No, not at all.
Probably will not.
The air compressor, I was asking $4,000 for it, and that was probably worth double the vehicle he was driving to get there.
Okay. So if anybody out there is looking for an obnoxiously large, extremely high capacity air compressor, hit us up at askshortstorylong@gmail.com. We'll get you a really special listener discount.
Yeah, that's right. We'll get you something real nice.
Real nice.
So even if you never hook it up, you can just show it off to people. That's what I do.
And then, so Dozer's claim to fame can now be yours.
That's right. The biggest air compressor in the tri-state area. The other thing I'm super proud of is my at-home forklift. I'm not sure which one I'm more proud of, but
having a forklift at home is the kind of flex that is kind of unrivaled by many people. Yeah. I mean, like, there's a lot of like dad flexes out there.
Like, it's like the niche group, what's a flex to a niche group?
Yeah. Like forklift certified since 98, baby.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a NC press brake at your house, which is also another niche
flex.
So, I mean, in some certain circles, you could be considered to be quite the baller.
I mean, what kind of life events have to happen for, to have the giant air compressor and at-home forklift? So you just never know where life's going to take you.
It's a wild ride. Just hang on, right?
That's true.
So we got a listener email, and the individual that emailed in is excited for me to read this, and I haven't read it yet, so it's a blind react for both of us.
I'm doing the buckle up motion.
All right, so from Travis, he's a listener, shout out. He says, just finished episode 26 and wanted to chime in on the Buc-ee's situation. So he is from Texas. As a Texas resident for 10 years, I can tell you it is a staple in the state of Texas, and most certainly originated there. It just recently, as of the last few years, branched out into other states like Florida, Tennessee, and there might be one under construction in Missouri. Anyway, it's a fight on site if you trash talk it. Noted. Glad I wasn't trash talking it, but I wasn't singing its praises either. As far as it being busy, that's just because that location has not been open that long, but typically you can walk into one just like a Casey's gas station here and get whatever you need. Cool thing about the ones in Texas is they have tons of fuel to choose from, including ethanol free for boats and small engines, and they also have DEF at the pump for diesel guys, which I did see they had like 4 ethanol free pumps and all the RV guys were going there. If I'm on the road and see one, I stop every time. Just a little tidbit about Buc-ee's. The more you know. Keep up the good work, and for God's sakes, get Brent Wallace on the podcast, which, full disclosure, I invited him tonight. He was getting off of work. about the time we started to record this podcast, and he said it's too late. He's got to go home and go to bed. So I'm not sure how old he is. I think he's like 29 or 30, but he acts like he's 80.
Didn't you try to schedule something and he gave us the date of like September?
Yeah.
Was the next time he was
he
free?
said, get a hold of me on a Wednesday or a Thursday in September. I was like, okay. Which he's not even a listener, so I don't even know why I care. But
I thought he was. We gave him the eggs and everything.
He's listened to a couple, but he'd rather listen to Tom Brady's podcast because apparently he's way cooler than us. So
there's probably a lot of his day is probably ate up taking care of that hair, you know.
Yeah, and Scott
takes a lot of time.
Yeah, between his hair and Scott, his plate's pretty full.
Understandable.
He does have 3 kids. I mean,
yeah,
that's got to be something too.
I suppose so.
Oh shoot.
Oh, I did not think we were going to dive into the old air compressor talk that much.
You never know what you're going to get here. So back to your turkey hunting. I got a little bit of a sad story.
Okay.
You went turkey hunting on Saturday.
Oh, yeah,
and not to our semi-annual Altamont outing at the swap meet.
So how I thought this was going to go down, I thought I was going to pull my huge and have a turkey shotgun down at about 8 o'clock. And all I would do is miss breakfast and just join you to go to the swap meet.
Did not happen.
It didn't happen like that. So that's kind of sad. I'm surprised my father-in-law didn't show up and go with you.
I didn't even text him. I didn't text a lot of people apparently. So I did invite the entire listening audience of 17 people to go with me.
Speaking of listening audience, my UPS driver showed up last week and he's like, hey, like what's on the podcast next week?
What?
Yeah.
Nice.
And then one of my customers, his employee, I was selling him hats and we were having kind of like a conference call. And he said, I need to get a hold of some dude out of Mount Zion that only restores 1969 Z28 Camaros. And
I've heard of this guy.
So I have his phone number.
Okay.
And we're supposed to have him on the podcast.
Okay.
I don't know if he ever would show up. I don't know why he would.
Ricky Robertson told me about him.
So they were telling me what this guy does, and he bought a 69 Camaro that has the original tires and brakes on it.
Okay.
It's got like 20,000 miles. How many zeros do you think were on that paycheck?
A few, I'm sure.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I bet that was not cheap.
Right.
But he restores them to like concourse, and he was trying to find, what was it? It was like the caps that go on the bleeders.
Okay,
of
yeah.
your brakes.
Uh-huh.
He was trying to find some, and they needed to have a certain color of overspray on them.
Okay.
And he was saying when he paints the stripes on a car, you can't mask them off. When they painted the rally stripes from the factory, it would get overspray in the engine base. So whenever you're redoing these cars and bringing them to shows, you have to have overspray on your engine if it's got stripes.
Really?
Yes. Like they look for that stuff.
And so that reminds me of a story on one of my Mopar pages. A guy posted a picture of like very, very close up of a part number on like a black piece of rubber. And he was explaining how he'd been searching his whole life for this part, and he finally found it at a swap meet, and basically like he can die now because he found this part. And 100 likes or whatever, and all the comments like, congratulations, I'm so happy for you. And I am just bewildered, have no clue what's going on. I said, forgive my ignorance, but what is this part? And he paid an astronomical amount of money for it. And turns out he had a, 71 Hemi Cuda, and it was the NOS trunk seal. So a 50-year-old piece of rubber, he was excited to pay a bunch of money for because it was an NOS part for his restoration. And they sell them for like $100 on the internet, made with new rubber that's arguably probably a better material. It's not going to leak. But at that point, I realized like I never want to own something that requires that level of detail. Like your overspray thing, like what is the point behind making every little detail so perfect that you can't even use the vehicle? You know what I mean? Like if the goal is to make it like factory so much that you sacrifice multiple things to make it worse than it should be. You know what I mean? Like most people would not want overspray on their engine, but you purposefully make it shitty because that's the way it was.
Yeah, and that, I mean, some people just find that stuff interesting, and I assume like the challenge. But those cars, after they get done, aren't being driven.
Right.
I'm sure that guy has cars he drives, to enjoy, but it's not the ones that he worries about getting the OEM bleeder covers for.
There's a couple guys that sell NOS oil filters for Mopars, and it's a 60-year-old oil filter. And the idea is you get your car to the show, spin off a good oil filter, and spin on this 60-year-old oil filter because it's correct. And then you can't start it because the cardboard will just disintegrate inside the filter. But you just spin it on there for looks while your car is being judged, and then you put your actual filter back on it to load it up and take it home.
That's why other countries hate us.
And Nick talks about that on his podcast about the illusion of
too much money.
The illusion of too much money. We invent problems. Like in third world countries, they don't have emissions because they're just trying to get their work done. Like they just want the son of a bitch to run and get food on the table or whatever. But we have too much money in America, or the illusion thereof, and we just have to invent problems to be worried about, like what color our Bud Light cans are.
Exactly. Well, I was reading a couple books by a guy named Jim Corbett, and he hunts killer cats in India, or hunted. He lived like late 1800s, early 1900s, mid 1900s.
Okay.
And he was a white guy in India, but India was a British colony. And you were not allowed to have guns except for certain people. And he was one of those people. So when like jaguars and cheetahs and stuff would eat, like terrorize the village, he would show up and shoot them.
Okay.
And he wrote books about it. So where I'm going with this is he writes in one of his books, he does one book called My India, which is just about India and like less about killing man-eating tigers.
Okay.
And he said the poor people in India are some of the happiest people on earth.
Okay.
Because they don't worry about stupid stuff. Like if they've got food for the day and water, they're happy.
Okay.
They don't have to worry about their cell phone bill being wrong, about not finding their cell phone charger, about their air conditioner going out in their house. Like they just, as long as they can eat that day,
happy to be alive.
They're happy to be alive.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to look, just a different perspective.
And perspective is everything. I mean, you can extrapolate that forever. I mean, we talked about that on Allie's podcast about, how these people thought this single wide trailer was just the greatest thing ever and something we'd turn our nose up at. But speaking of Allie's podcast.
Yeah.
Are you ready to drop the bomb?
Oh, well, you do it.
Okay. So
That's my drinking.
We have been tirelessly, mostly Dozer.
And the Pakistanis.
And the Pakistanis have been coming up with our logo to put on shirts. So we have officially done a logo on shirts. We have select sizes and colors that we have been having Jedco make for us, and they've printed them up. And if we do say so ourselves, I think they look pretty good. So I will be sporting one of those this weekend, I am sure. If you're interested in one, get a hold of us. We're going to try and give them out to our guests. So maybe that'll I don't know.
I think we should do a merch store.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. That's on Dozer's end. He's got all these fancy computer things where if you want the logo on something, we can make that happen. So taking suggestions on that type of stuff. But so far we have a few shirts available. And I do have one specifically set aside for Zeth and obviously ourselves. And I was told today that if Kyle doesn't get one, he'll never be on the podcast again. So have to get Kyle one.
Okay, we'll have to find one an extra squirrely for him.
So super excited about that. I mean, it
Do you
really
think Boss Man would wear one of our shirts?
not a chance in hell. Not a snowball's chance in hell. He might wear it mowing, maybe.
He doesn't mow though.
Oh yeah, that's right. So no, he would not. Well, no, he does. He mows with his brush cutter on his skid steer.
Gotcha.
But he would have previously attended some business function 30 seconds prior to that brush cutting, so he would not have a chance to change into his short story long podcast t-shirt.
So what we did is we had a big liquidation sale on inventory. And Sam showed up. He's like, why don't we do some of these for the podcast? Well, at that point, we had sold all the good shirts for nothing, basically no money.
A day late and $1 short.
So we picked through and got a bunch of yellow and green shirts.
Shirts nobody wants. Then we put our faces on to make them even less
worse.
Desirable.
So we started, if you notice the thumbnail for the podcast is me and Sam leaning on two engines. So we've got some overseas artists that redo art and stuff for really reasonable. And I sent him that picture and said, please redraw to where we can, it's print ready art. And we got back the absolute worst renditions of me and Sam's face ever. So Sam's over at the refrigerator getting a drink. Otherwise, I'm sure he'd be chiming in. But I sent Sam a Snapchat. I zoomed in. I was like, I paid $45 for this. And Sam called me just dying laughing.
I have only recently stopped laughing about that, by the way. I have a copy in my office on the wall.
Oh, I have a copy as well on my wall.
I think we'll make that the cover photo for this podcast.
So we also have a lady locally that does some graphics work contracting for us. And I sent her the stuff from the Pakistanis and she fixed it up real nice to where we have something usable. So, but I will say I printed some shirts for my kids and gave the shirts to the kids today. And what you got going on over there, Sam? What is happening there?
I have not previously tried this drink. It is a Crook and Marker organic espresso martini, and I was trying to see if it needed shaken before being opened, and as I pull the Huggy down, it says 10% ABV.
Oh,
so it was a little bit of a shock to the system.
A little stout.
Anyway.
So Laren holds them up and goes, Emma, do you know who these people are? And she's like, no.
Damn it.
Laren's like, it's your dad and Tool Man Sam. She's like, no, it's not.
Shit.
So
from the mouth of babes.
Shout out to Jedco for their amazing graphics.
In your defense, it was not Jedco's art team that did that.
Oh, shoot. So we got whatever we could find for free under the back table at Jedco and printed our faces on them.
Yeah. So I think we'll have to do Huggies for sure.
Yeah. Get a hold of us. Well, are we giving these away? Are we trying to sell them? Are we
the ones that were free, I think we should give away. And then if we need to get sizes and stuff, people where we actually have to spend more money.
So if I guess we need to get a shirt up on the internet or something and see if people want to buy these. And if there's enough interest, we'll do a store.
Sure. Got to pay for this podcast.
We could do tumblers. 'Cause, I mean, we could do tumblers. We could do, like, a shirt. 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 We could do, like, a shirt.
Tumblers? Okay.
Tumblers, Huggies.
I
As
don't
we're
know.
on the verge of like not doing this show ever again because we've run out of stuff to talk about.
Right at the time we dropped the merch.
We merch drop. We need to do better about planning. Life is kind of hectic right now, but we need to.
We got a lot of ideas, just getting them in motion is the problem.
Yes, because we don't think about this podcast until approximately an hour before we do it.
Well, I was thinking of it like an hour and a half
Oh,
before.
gotcha.
So, it's because you were a half hour late. So,
What does that mean?
I'm just saying. So anyway, back to car stuff. The swap meet was pretty cool. I was happily surprised at the number of vendors that were there. Lots and lots of motorcycle stuff there this year, so that was kind of cool if you're into motorcycles. I was able to get a Power Wheels for Dozer's kids.
And they are driving the balls off of that thing.
Well, the wheels were already half off, so they will be fully off here shortly. I got some Pit Pal stuff for Kyle's new trailer. Got a super good deal on that. Basically got like $700 worth of Pit Pal stuff for $250, so that was pretty cool.
Nice.
And then, so if you remember the story about the Nuggy Slayer, my 98 Chevy, when I spilled the drink, I sold it to Sherwood. And literally like 2 weeks after that, somebody gifted him the Igloo Cool Rest. Did I tell you about that?
Maybe. But...
So it's from the 80s, back when you could drink and drive and not go to prison for the rest of your life. Igloo made a cooler that went on your bench seat and made it a center console you could use as an armrest. And it was, you open the lid and put your beer in there, and there was 2 cup holders in the front of it. And they bring just stupid money on eBay. And I go in the pavilion in the inside deal, and there's one sitting there. And super long story short, I got it bought very reasonable. And I was just going to put it up on eBay and make some money. But now I'm thinking it should probably make its way into the Dart because there's no cup holders in the Dart. So I got to get the Dart over here and see if it'll fit in there. But I'll show it to you after we get done.
You should, yeah. I still haven't seen your lifters for your Hemi.
They're at Crossroads.
They're at Crossroads. Got it.
So that was that. And then speaking of Hemi.
Oh, whew, sore subject.
Today was a
rough day.
Today was a roller coaster of emotion.
Okay.
So firstly, we got registered for Mo Party. So that is coming up this September, I believe. But Mo Party is the Holly thing down in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Yeah, September 15th through the 17th is so they have LS Fest every year, and then they had Ford Fest, which is like I think a couple weeks after LS Fest, which is those are both really well known. And then they did in between the two, they have Mo Party, and I will say I've been there twice. I skipped last year. We got registered this year to go this fall, and Holly knows how to put on a good show for spectators. There's been some, I guess, griping about the drag racing side of it, and some people in our circle that drag race are a little less than pleased with the drag racing side of it. But in Holly's defense, they're used to putting on shows for people who've never drag raced before that just have, an LS swap this or that or a Corvette or whatever, and they just want to go put down a quick ET. Well, what they didn't realize, in my opinion, is that Mopar guys are legit bracket racers, and they've been bracket racing for 50 years, and they know how they want to race, and they know how a race should be run. So when Holly just kind of pulls something out of their butts to put it together, they didn't really cater specifically to the drag racing crowd. So it's been getting better every year. But anyway, we got registered for that. And then Kyle texted me, "Hey, did you talk to my old man yet?" No, Kyle, I haven't. I was getting ready to go there a little later because Dozer actually went up to Nate's and got my heads back for me and was going to get those put over in the Crossroads shop so we could slap the old Hemi back together and get her back in the GTX. Well, apparently over Easter or whatever, Dean was making mention that he needed to talk to me, and the 4 scariest words in the English language are, "We need to talk." So I get there, and turns out my crankshaft for the Hemi,
and run us through it with voices and everything.
with voices and everything.
So you walk into the shop, put us in the moment.
So he's sitting on the concrete floor, just sitting, Indian style, on the floor, smoking a cig. So, Winston just lit up. And Samuel, how's it going? Like, well,
depends on how this conversation goes.
Not too bad. I was told I needed to talk to you. Yep, you need to come check this out. I was like, what's the bad news? He goes, well, you just got to come and look. And so he's like, I got the bottom end tore apart finally, and didn't like what I found. I was like, okay, here we go. Said, I got to spend more money, don't I? Yep, you got to spend some more money. And he takes me over there, and he's got the crankshaft sitting there by the engine. And essentially what had happened is it was assembled incorrectly. There was far too much end play in the crankshaft, and that was causing 2 issues. The first issue was the oil leak. That's why the rear main seal was leaking, because the end play in the crankshaft. And they were not afraid of the silicone gun. There was silicone all over that motor. And he was like, I'm going to clean all this up. They did this wrong, did this wrong, did this wrong. And essentially, the other side of the deal was the actual thrust bearing in the middle of the block was eating into the counterweight in the middle of the crankshaft. And there was about a 16th inch deep groove cut into the counterweight. And the radiuses and everything on the mains were just not good. And one of the rod pins in the radius had what looked to be a repaired crack. And essentially, it's just no good, just junk. Basically, not worth fighting over. Just get a new one. And turns out the grit in the oil pan was the counterweight of my crankshaft. So, I'm 2 for 2 on self-machining engine parts on my Mopar stuff. So,
your other one's still working out a little better.
To be honest, it ran.
It ran.
Ran when pulled. So, it just, I don't know, just another blow. No more money. And got to pricing crankshafts and lead times and everything. I went to Effingham regrinding, and he told me, you're going to have $500-600 here. And it's like a maybe. And he's like, if it was like a grain truck motor or something, I'd say, okay. But if it's going in a car, even though it's a street car, you're going to romp on it. I know you will. It's not something I'd be comfortable repairing. So just, if they're available, just get a new one. Like, it's one thing. One thing, I went through a little tour of the old Effingham regrinding shop. It's very, very, very impressive. Just all the vintage iron in there, which I've talked earlier about going to Jansen's garage and seeing the old tractors and stuff. Well, they do a lot of the machine work for Jansen's garage in like these old blocks with Babbitt bearings and stuff. And they pour the Babbitts and machine them. And just like, there's not a machine in that shop that's younger than the owner, who's in his late 50s, early 60s, probably. Dean?
Probably his early 60s, yeah.
But it's just, and it's just machine after machine after machine. And like, I knew what most of them were, but there is probably a dozen or better machines in there I've never seen before. Don't know what they are. They do something, they have a purpose. Covered in an inch of dust, like, probably hasn't been turned on this decade yet, but he knows he's going to need it at some point. It's just cool as hell. And you told me that he had stuff that gets shipped in from all over the world because he's kind of unique in the fact that the type of work he does. So anyway, I thought it was cool. I have a lot of respect for anyone who owns a business that turns away my business. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, if I come to Jedco and I was like, hey, I want you to custom engrave this podcast board or whatever, you'd be like, dude, that's not what we do. You should probably go do something different. Like, I can point you in the right direction. Like, I have a lot of respect for the business owners. Just like, I don't want to take your money. Like, I want to give you the best product for your money, So I was happy that he said that to me. So back to square one, looking for a crankshaft, looking at pricing and looking at lead times, and I'm heavily leaning towards a stroker crankshaft
I knew it.
because
Since you was.
I need bearings and rings, and stroker kits come with bearings and rings. So I talked to Rick Willenberg tonight, and he said the same thing. Kyle said the same thing. Dean did not. Dean said just buy a crankshaft, but I was going to revisit it with him as far as cost is concerned, because when you add it all up, it's not a whole lot more to go with the stroker kit. The caveat being, according to Rick, make sure you can do internal oiling with a stock pickup, and you don't need to do any block clearancing, which I'm 100% on board with that. I do not want to do any block clearancing or external oiling. And the nail in the coffin was in the group chat that I have with the Gebhardts and Sherwood and all those guys. I was explaining this, and Tim said, I'm on team. If it breaks, upgrade it. Don't just fix it. I was like, okay. And so I, basically explained the cost difference between what I need, and what the stroker kit costs. And my girlfriend goes, just buy the stroker kit. And of course, all the guys in the group chat are like, oh my God, she's a unicorn. And I was like, and she goes, well, just fix it right the first time, be done. If it's a little bit more money, whatever, just get it done. And I was like, well, it doesn't really need the stroker kit. It's kind of like when you tell your girlfriend, like, the car really needs this exhaust driven alternator to function properly, and it's actually a turbocharger. But at the same time, has anybody ever regretted having more power?
Exactly.
So,
and see, another thing you haven't considered, which you brought this to my attention on my tractor axle on what to do, was the value of the parts you have for resale.
Keith Black pistons and H-beam rods with ARP bolts.
Right. So, there's probably several $100 there, if not $1,000.
Right.
So honestly, it's same.
Money ahead.
Yeah. Plus or minus $500 either way. But
when it's like, I don't even know what to equate it to, but it's like a sunk cost kind of fucking scenario where, like, I only pulled this engine to fix an exhaust leak on the exhaust manifold.
Since you was.
And it's been snowballing rapidly since then. It's got new brakes, new steering.
You pulled it to put new exhaust manifold gaskets on, and you got new rear brakes in the deal.
Yeah. So, if you have experience with Since You Was, please email in, because we're going to do a whole episode about it.
Since you was going to do this, you might as well do that. And that's, you got to be real careful there.
It snowballs in a hurry.
That's the reason Samuel's 440 in his Dart has used bearings in it. Because he knew if you put new bearings in it, it's getting a stroker crank.
Well, the same argument that I just said 2 minutes ago, that stroker, you said that to me. Stroker kits come with bearings. Because I dropped a rod bearing in oil dry underneath the motor and yeeted a freaking shop stool out into the driveway with my broken freaking toe.
Oh, do you remember when I got super pissed at my mom and dad's working on my Jeep, and I slammed that like 2-pound sledgehammer down on the ground, and it bounced across the garage and went into the trash can?
I do remember that.
Who would have thought that just a big chunk of iron would bounce like that?
It was thrown by a considerably sized man.
That was probably intoxicado.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the situation on the GTX, getting ready to spend even more money. But can't take it with you, right?
Hey, I remember when you were redoing your Dart after I first got married. I was like, dude, you're spending a lot of money on this. And you looked at me and goes, you said, I'll go to work and make more tomorrow.
That's right. Like, we go to work every day to have toys and, to live and have toys. So, I mean, the alternative is I don't have a car to drive. You know what I mean? Like, you got to do something. I can't just not put it back together. So, I mean, here we are. We're just doing the damn thing.
I don't think you'll regret having it.
The stroker.
Yeah.
So where we're at right now is I'm waiting on a call back from Mancini's.
Oh, you want to go into how you cannot find any Gen 2 Hemi stuff on the internet?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. So if you search 426 Hemi, which is how I typically search for Hemi parts because there's so many Gen 3 Hemis out there, which would be your 5.7, 6.1, 6.4 type stuff, that if you type into Google 426 Hemi camshaft or whatever, like that's where you're going to find Gen 2 parts. Well, come to find out, a 426 Hemi, you know, in the last 10 years doesn't mean a Gen 2 anymore. It means a stroked 6.1. That's what everybody wants, is a Gen 3 Hemi stroked to 426 cubic inches. So Mancini Racing is what I would consider a boomer website. I mean, they've been in business for years and years and years, and they do all kind of stuff for old Mopars. They do new Mopar stuff too. So they had a stroker kit available. 440 Source did not. Indy Cylinder Heads is even more of a boomer website because every link takes you to a PDF of their catalog. So I have to search for parts like a boomer and get a phone number and call, which is arguably the most efficient way to find parts for a 426 Hemi, because I spent about 20 minutes today researching or attempting to research. I even put in Gen 2 Hemi stroker kits, and you find something like, okay, this makes sense, you know, whatever, looking at the parts list and everything, and then it gets down to the crankshaft details and it talks about how many teeth are on the tone ring. Like, well, this is obviously Gen 3 because I do not need tone ring on my Gen 2 Hemi. You know what I mean? So it's tough. It's out of my wheelhouse. I kind of like have been learning as I go with this thing. And the other thing is when you go to like your strictly performance type sites, since the Gen 2 Hemi is the base for every super high performance application, then you get into all of your custom stuff, like your top fuel motors, your big pulling motors, anything that's going to have dual spark plugs and dual distributors and forced induction and everything. When you start talking aftermarket parts for 426 Hemi, you're either stock or 5,000 or plus horsepower. You know what I mean? So it's very, very difficult to find exactly what it is that you're looking for. Like, the camshaft selection was the same way. I mean, there was a couple street cams. There was like the thumper cam like I ordered. Then like you're talking 450 lift to 500 lift. And it goes from there to 800 plus lift. Like, hold on, like let's cool it a little bit. You know what I mean? Like we're not trying to build a top fuel motor here, but it's just a struggle. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, my neighbor, he's an old school hot rodder, and he used to buy cams for his 351 Clevelands from the place that made them for Ford Racing. And he brought me over an old like an old book of cams, and some of the 351 Cleveland cams were 800 lift.
Yeah. I guess when you're talking an NA motor, they kind of pulled no punches when it came to trying to get more air. I mean, VE is what you're talking about, volumetric efficiency. The more air you can get through it. I mean, all an engine is an air pump.
Right.
And the more air you can get through it, the more power it's going to make. So, I mean, it's kind of cool to think about the history of high performance and like all the kooky stuff they tried trying to get more power out of stuff.
And the things that change over the years, you know, they say like the time the valve is open is more important than how much lift it is.
Sure.
Now. And
right.
One of Nate that builds tractor pulling heads was telling me about the Miller effect. So they started grinding cams to open the exhaust valve too soon because it would drive the turbo harder, make more
Okay.
powder
Okay.
power. So just and you look into like that sloppy mechanics and how they get stock bottom end stuff to live all goes on where you put your timing in, where power comes in, and they're talking about like making transmissions live, like where you shift your transmission makes a big deal, and it's just super interesting, like things you would never think of if you're a tuner. You know, that has to go in to make all this stuff live.
Well, yeah, when you're running stuff at the very ragged edge, like every little detail matters at that point.
Yeah.
So now that I am slowly transitioning into a boomer, I need to get myself some white New Balances ordered
Yeah. You
and
gotta stay away from them electric cars.
some jean shorts. And if this GTX don't jump a Coke can, we're gonna have some serious
We'll
problems.
pull that hit me out, put a BBC in there.
So I don't. The next concern is it's a domino thing. So like I was arguably on the high end of the cam selection for a stock bottom end. Going stroker, like the camshaft might be, okay. You could arguably go a little bigger now doing the stroker. But now running all the numbers for the cam with the stock bottom end, the carburetor that was previously selected, like, is it going to be big enough? So Wednesday, I'm going to run the numbers again. Like, if I do decide to go with the stroker, how many CFM carburetor do I need at that point? And then, so we had previously selected an 870, which has vacuum secondaries since it's a street car with an automatic transmission and an electric choke. Can you get, and I haven't done this research yet, can you get a 900 plus CFM carburetor that A, is vacuum secondary? I don't freaking think so. And B, is it going to have a choke horn on it? Also, don't think so. And if it is available, is it affordably priced? Like, are we talking Dominator type money? Are we talking like some custom built carburetor type stuff, which is not a road I want to go down? And then, if it's a CFM issue, which you could arguably put a smaller carburetor on it because the CFM is only important at, your top RPM. And like, I'm not going to spin it 6,000 RPM routinely like I'm drag racing it. Like it's going to see it once or twice a day that it gets driven, if I'm showboating, hot rodding, whatever. But if it is a CFM issue, like, do you put a great big carburetor that is arguably not streetable because there's no idle circuits that are, right, or there's no vacuum secondary, or there's no choke horn? Or do you just buy a high CFM fuel injection throttle body? You know what I mean? Like, where do you make that distinction at?
I would stick with the 870.
You think so?
Yeah.
Did you just run some math?
No, not necessarily. I'm just looking. 870 is the biggest second, vacuum secondary.
Okay.
And I'm sure that would be enough for under certain RPMs.
Like if it starts to cut out at 5,500 RPM, it wouldn't even cut out. It would just the power band would taper off, right?
Right. Yeah. It would just kind of flatten out, quit pulling.
So
it would be fine. I'm sure. We have not discussed running two smaller carbs.
Well, that's a thing that requires another $1,000 investment in an intake, as well as if I'm going to forfeit the tuning help from the Mopar Godfather, I might as well put fuel injection on it.
Yeah, that's true. I would just run a single 870. I'm sure you'd be fine.
Because he told me, because I asked him when I first got the car, because we were at Mo Party, and there was a couple 2.4 intakes for him. He's there for sale, decently reasonable. And when I say reasonable, less than $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, should I do this? What do you think? And he's like, well, the first issue you're going to run into is you got to buy two carburetors. Like, okay. And then you got to buy a super expensive air cleaner to fit two carburetors. Okay. And he said, and then you can forget about asking me to help you tune it. And I was like, all right, I just sealed the deal. You could have led with that.
Save some breath.
Oh, shoot. So, yeah. What else has been going on? Anything? feel like there's something else I was wanting to talk about, but I don't remember what it was now.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anything? Nothing?
Nothing. I mean, I've got stuff written down, but I'm wore out at this point. So
What are you doing when you go home?
I guess I'm gonna go home and cut the jack stand or the jack off a trailer and fix it.
So, as of right now, at the recording of this podcast, Dozer has officially decided he would rather be a Razor passenger than a Razor driver, right?
That's correct.
So I believe the decision was made to not purchase the Razor.
That's correct.
And in returning said Razor to its rightful owner, he ripped the jack off of a trailer that needs to be reattached.
Remedied.
Luckily, he has Peace Lily Metalworks on standby for that project. So that's good. And then at the time of the release of this podcast, I may or may not own my 22nd Jeep.
Oh, yes.
So I got another phone call from the guy that sold me my red XJ. And he's like, got another Jeep for you. You want it? I'm like, well, I don't know. Tell me about it. And it's a 98 Grand Cherokee 4-liter. That's all I know about it, really. That's all I know about it. And I'm going to go look at it tomorrow and see what the hell it is and see if I need to just come home with it. And if it's going to be something that, I mean, the possibilities are endless. Could not buy it, or I could buy it and part it out, or I could buy it and then resell it, or I could buy it and fix it, or I could buy it and take it to Chicken Holler and beat the shit out of it. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, put you a 4-inch lift on there and some 35s and come wheel with the Jeep guys.
Could do that while I'm waiting on the Comanche to be done.
So we'll see what happens.
Oh, shoot.
Well, once again, we didn't really talk about anything. Just an hour of talking about nothing.
Pretty typical.
Some people tend to like it, so we appreciate you guys coming along for the ride once again.
So let's see. We covered air compressors. If you are interested, like I said, get a hold of us. We'll make you a super special listener discount.
Yes.
And then what else? We covered turkey hunting. We covered swap meeting.
Poor people are happier.
Poor people are happier.
The new merch.
New merch. So yeah, so get a hold of us if you guys have a certain thing you want to see our logo on. Like I said, we'll put the logo on we'll put the bad logo as for the podcast on the Facebook machine. So get a hold of us at askshortstorylong@gmail.com or on Facebook at the Short Story Long Podcast. And guys, thanks for riding along with us, and we will see you on the next one.
See you guys later.
It's been a long, bumpy ride sitting back in the saddle. It's time to get down, dirty up our knees into battle. Oh, come on, round up the boys, gonna make the walls rattle. Oh, our flag is tattered and our bones are shattered, but it doesn't matter 'cause we're moving forward. Round them up, let's go. Round them up, let's go. We've been shot up, beat up by the falling of the arrow. Yeah, full of deep cuts right down to the marrow. But there's no doubt we'll get out from the bottom of the barrel. Oh, our flag is tattered and our bones are shattered, but it doesn't matter 'cause we're moving forward. Round them up, let's go. Round them up, let's go. me now? Do you feel me now? I'm breaking down your door. I'm not speaking under my breath, 'cause the